Welcome to Dugout Chatter. We are going to see how America's pastime has shaped generations of young men and women into the determined people they are today.
Yeah, I pitched a little bit too. What's funny is one of my brothers, he said he couldn't pitch because it gave him too much time to think. So it's funny how that works with some people. And like, even like when we still play around and like, you know, sometimes we'll still go to the fields for fun. He can only throw on the run. It's the weirdest thing.
Right. No, and it's paralysis by analysis. I talk to the kids about that sometimes too. I had a game in a summer collegiate league game where I couldn't see, for some reason my contacts were acting up. I couldn't see the catcher signs. And I said, listen, all we're going to do is we're going to go fastball, changeup, curveball. And if I get somebody out with a changeup, we'll start the next guy off with a curve. We're just going to go sequence. I can't see your signs. The amazing thing was I threw a complete game 2-hitter. And
how old were you?
This was the summer league. I was between my junior and senior year. This is right before I transferred to ASU. So I was against elite. This is Arizona Summer Collegiate League. I was against elite hitters. But because I thought about it later, and it wasn't because, you know, I was so much better than everybody, far from it. It was because I didn't overthink myself ever on any pitch. There were no options. You had to throw everything with 100% conviction. And when you do that, and there's no doubting yourself, and good things happen.
Yeah, that's really true. Because I remember one podcast I had my brother on, and I told him, like, one reason I liked playing third is because it took out some of your time to think. Because the ball just hits you. You know, it's those twitch muscles that fire. Tell me a little bit about your coaching. So you're starting a little like it was like a new coaching alliance type of thing.
Well, so I've got a few irons in the fire, as I always do. I was done playing in 2000 because of a shoulder injury. I started coaching at the Arizona Diamondbacks Training Academy, which is it's mostly summer camps for kids. And then we found out that Chicago had one of those for the White Sox that goes year round. My degree was actually from Northwestern. So we figured, hey, and my wife's from Chicago. I was like, this is working out well. So I moved back there in 2002, started working for them, did, I think, on somewhere in the number of 3,000 baseball lessons between 2002 and 2006. And then I moved towards a place called Positive Coaching Alliance in 2006 because they were starting a chapter in Chicago. Did a bunch of workshops for coaches, parents, athletes, all talking about life lessons through sports, how to win even when you don't win. Great things that kids can take away from sports without even thinking about it, and how you as adults can build that into them through sports. Then, unfortunately, the downturn hit in 2008. My job was eliminated. I had to become an attorney and join the real world. So what a shame. But even after that,
must have been a wild transition.
It was a little bit of a transition. Law was always something that my mother actually was an attorney, and I was always sort of on the back burner. I'm just like, I'm going to hold off on that as long as I possibly can because I love baseball too much. But ultimately, it just, you know, I had a daughter at that point. It was like, I have to join the real world. But I still found ways to help with high school, little league, anywhere I could get coaching, still do lessons on the weekends. And now just this year, I started my own podcast where I'm taking the lessons that I taught for Positive Coaching Alliance and teaching parents how to bridge that gap between parents and coaches, because it's tricky and you really don't want to create enemies when you're doing that.
Yeah, it's true. Like my brother said with his son, he wanted to wait a little bit till he gets into coaching him. Because, you know, let them figure out some things on their own. And like I was actually texting my girlfriend today, and like we were both saying, you know, it's good his name's Miles. It's good because it teaches kids accountability. Like what lessons that you were saying, like what did you take from baseball, you know, going into your life, law practice, or, you know, whatever?
There were so many things. The number one thing about baseball, as you know, is, you know, you hit 300, you're the best hitter in the world. And so you're failing 7 times out of 10. That's an incredible lesson for kids. You can't always be successful. And even when you're unsuccessful, sometimes you've made progress. When I teach the pitchers, I say, you know, there's never a bad pitch necessarily, because it's all about the next pitch. It's all about, just because you threw that one 2 feet outside, now the hitter's leaning over the plate, and now you can do some different things on the next one. So it's about adaptability. It's about learning from your mistakes. Sports is such an easy way to build that into kids, but it just has to be intentional by the coaches. You can't just sort of sit back and hope for the best, try to skill build, and whatever happens, happens. The best coaches in the world, and I did a whole podcast almost on John Wooden, the best coaches in the world are intentional and they take time out of each practice to build skills and life lessons into their kids, because you're making professional people. Maybe you'll coach a professional athlete at some point, but every one of them is going to become a professional person, and you want to have a tremendous impact in that child's life.
Yeah, it's pretty few and far in between. I know the high school I played at, we only had 5 people in the school's history make it to the major leagues.
It's 5 more than a lot of schools, so that's not too
No,
bad.
it is. No, 5's a lot. Like, I went to Santa Lucia's. They were nationally ranked back in the early 2000s. And right now we actually have one guy who went there. He was a senior my freshman year. He actually just got traded to the Diamondbacks. So he's in the AAA system with them right now, I believe. He was a setup man for Devin Williams at the beginning of the year. His name's Peter Strzelecki. So yeah, we're still rooting for him. But going back to your playing career, so at what point did you really get the itch to like make it to the next level? Because for me, I found it like my sophomore year, you're more one of the guys on the team. People are looking up to you, and you got to be someone who has to produce.
Initially, it was funny because in high school, as a junior, we had a team full of seniors, incredible, talented seniors. In '94, our senior team, our varsity team, was 31-2. So as a junior, I couldn't crack the lineup. I was stuck on JV the whole season. I'm an incredible JV pitcher, but who cares? So as a senior, all of those guys graduated. I was the only pitcher left. And so I had to say, all right, well, it's my turn now. And I went 12-2 and an ERA in the ones. I led the state in strikeouts, had a good year. It's probably the most meteoric rise of a JV pitcher in 1 year that anybody's ever had. So it was at that point I kind of thought, well, maybe I can do something with this. But when you've only ever played varsity in your senior year, you're not on anybody's radar. All the college recruiting is done in the fall and the winter. That's over with. The scholarship money's gone. And even though I had a nice season, I still was not drafted. I just figured I'll go to school for academics. I chose Northwestern University. They, created a spot for me. How nice of them on their roster.
So you were a walk-on?
I was essentially a walk-on there. I mean, they gave me a spot. I can't say that I ever had to worry about having a spot, but the playing time was hit and miss. The coaching was hit and miss. And after 3 years, I'd had enough. That's when I played in the Summer Collegiate League in Arizona. And I was lucky enough to play for a guy named Clint Myers, who was a legendary softball coach down here. His 2 boys, Casey and Corey, both played pro ball. And he said, ASU in '98 went all the way to the College World Series final, lost to USC, but almost the whole team is graduating. You might want to give it a shot. I said, you know what? I might want to give it a shot. Let me just throw a year out of Northwestern. I'll come to ASU for a year. Whatever happens, happens. That was a pure walk-on situation. And I was the last guy on the roster, made the team, did well, actually led the '99 Sun Devils in ERA. So I don't know how that happened still. And then it was, okay, well, maybe I have a shot at big league ball. I still was I was a submariner. They converted me to underneath. So on paper, I'm a right-hander. I'm a senior. I throw 84 because that's how hard I threw from the side. So who's going to draft?
Pretty hard from the side.
It's hard from the side, but that doesn't get
Darren O'Day made a living out of that.
So a lot of guys had, and that was kind of in the late 90s. That was kind of the beginning of the sidearm submarine revolution. The Chad Bradfords of the world were coming. And the Diamondbacks had Byung-Hyun Kim back then.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking
incredible.
Of. Yeah.
So they kept showing me tapes. Eventually, the Diamondbacks took me because I went to a free agent tryout, and they kept showing me tapes of this guy. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. But
he threw in the low 90s from down there.
Oh, he was incredible. And he had what we call the Nintendo slider. And I had a really good slider that went different directions. And that was about all I had. But after 2 years, my labrum could not take the load. Even in the minors, people don't realize you're playing 140 games in 1 month less than the big league guys do. You're playing every day. It's exhausting. And if you can't get your body to react and back in business every day, you're going to be done, especially as a pitcher. So that was a real challenge. But that was sort of the up and down of my career until I just kept my nose down. I didn't know where it was going to lead. I just kept trying to outwork every single person next to me and in front of me. And whatever happened, happened.
Yeah. But one interesting thing, like going back to, like you said, your junior year, being a junior on JV, did being around that much talent, like, wasn't that kind of infectious though? Because you really can learn a lot from those really talented guys.
Yeah, it was interesting because we got the scrimmage with the varsity guys when I was in high school, and it was a good challenge. And I would go up on tournaments and sit the bench, and so I got to be around all those guys who went on and played college ball. So that was a nice environment, but it was more so. It was interesting. I look back at my high school coach. He really didn't know a lot about coaching. He was a football guy that just happened to also coach the baseball team. And in my senior year, he turned over the lineup to me, the pitchers to me, and he said, Charlie, basically, I hope you can do something with these pitchers because I can't. So, but I guess that was in many ways my first coaching experience. And in the long run, that helped me learn my craft by coaching these other pitchers who really shouldn't have been out there. I was 12-2. The whole team was 15-16. So it was rough. If I wasn't on the mound, it was a pretty rough season, but I had a good time and it was good to coach.
Yeah. So especially like having some time in the minor leagues, I'm sure you have plenty of interesting stories. Cause like you hear about like guys will make like $2,000 a year or something. And like four people sharing an apartment.
Yeah. The first year I was lucky enough. I played in Missoula, Montana, which is one of the most beautiful towns I've ever seen, especially in the summer. It's fantastic. I was lucky enough to get a host family, so I didn't have to pay for anything.
Oh, yeah.
I think I was, and they were wonderful. All they wanted was tickets to the games. I was like, yeah, no problem. Wow. That's great. They fed me. They gave me a bed. It was wonderful. I think I got my first year, besides the $500 signing bonus and the plane ticket, I think I got about $650 a month to play. So wow. You got to stretch that out as much as you can. But no, you're not making a living on that.
Yeah, and like now, like I still keep up with a lot of it because I kind of fell out of love with big league ball in some ways. Like, and then now the minor leaguers finally got free housing from the major league teams. So, do you still keep up with like any of that, or have any affiliations with professional baseball?
Well, what's interesting is by now, because now I'm 46. Most of the guys that I played with, I think all the guys that I played with are done playing. There was a time when there would be some guys that I played with at ASU or various levels that I'd still keep in touch with them. So last 5-10 years, my focus has been almost exclusively youth baseball, high school baseball, getting the next generation up and going, which I find so much more rewarding than watching big league baseball. Big league baseball is fun, but I think it's more important for kids to see the big leaguers and look at how it can be done. But in terms of where I am now in my life, I love watching the youth sports and coaching that area.
One thing I've really, like my brother and I got a lot more into is international baseball, like the WBC, like the Olympics. I find that stuff so much more engaging. Like the fans are so passionate. I was actually at the pre-qualifying game with Team USA against Venezuela. There was probably about somewhere around 3,000 to 6,000 people there, but it was the loudest game I've ever been to in my life. Because like everyone's so invested. I mean, it just means something different when you put like your country's logo and like your flag on your jersey.
Right.
Have you kept up with any of that?
I haven't, but it's on my bucket list to go to Japan and see one of those games because I know what sort of environment they have overseas. And looking back, I had when my shoulder tore, I had an opportunity after I rebuilt it to go play in Japan, and I turned it down, and that was so dumb. It seemed like no, I don't want to. It seemed like a step in the wrong direction. But looking back at what that league is and what even back then, I absolutely should have done it because I know I would have loved it. The people there appreciate the game so much more. I love the Diamondbacks locally, but I go to it and it's like people are watching a movie sometimes. It's really kind of frustrating how not
the fan base. Yeah, they're not as engaged as they are in Japan. I mean, like if you look at the highlights, it's like a party every night.
Right. No,
and they're always packed, and they treat like any former big leaguer that goes over there like royalty.
Yeah. And I remember during COVID, and you probably did the same thing. The only game in town was the South Korean League. And I watched every one of those games, and I was so grateful. I remember Carl Ravitch would do the games, and I'd sometimes they'd be on at 3, and my wife would tell me, say, you can record these games. I said, no, I need to see these things live. This is all I have right now.
Yeah, I can't watch recorded baseball. It's just even like if you haven't seen like a random regular season game, it's just so hard to stomach for some reason.
Right.
So did you have any like identity crisis after playing baseball? Because my brother, he was kind of in a similar situation. He had a slap tear. I think it was in his labrum too, actually, and he was a catcher. So
Yeah, no,
after that, he couldn't come back the same, had the yips, tight tendons and everything.
yeah. Oh, it was hard to try to figure out because after I tore my labrum, the Diamondbacks were I'm very thankful they paid for my surgery and they paid for all my rehab, but I was still released and I had to figure it out. For about a year and a half, I still entertained thoughts of a comeback, but by then there's just so many new pitchers coming up every single year. There was just no way. Luckily, I had coaching to sort of soften the blow because realistically, I retired in 2000 and then I didn't really get into the non-baseball world until 2008. So I had a long transition slowly out of it. Luckily, with youth sports, there's lots of options for people who have it in their blood who can't get rid of it, and so that helped. But yeah, it's really hard when you think of boy, I used to play baseball for a living, and now I work 9 to 5 as an attorney, which I will say I love the firm where I work. But yeah, it's still not the same.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It was hard for me. Like I was done after high school. Like I could have gone to play college, but it just didn't seem like a smart decision to leave Florida, go pay out of state tuition, rack up student debt. But there's just always kind of like that bitterness. Like, man, I gave my whole life to this and now it's just over.
Right. Well,
I definitely felt that.
And you can still, and I think I listened to something that you were you still coaching with your high school coach? Is that still going on?
Not currently. I might be doing some more work with my nephew's team. It's hard with high school. Like it's 3:00 every day for practice. It's really fun though. But this year, unfortunately, I won't have the time for it.
Well, luckily you're young. I mean, you've got plenty of time for it. So there's always places to coach and places that need passion.
Yeah, no, I was definitely looking like at where my nephew's playing, maybe help them out a bit. It's really fun because like I did it in high school too with more of a youth level, like 10 to 12. I did some volunteer hours coaching, and the kids really look up to you and they really take in a lot. And I felt like with the role I was in, I was kind of like more because I was an assistant coach. I was a little more relatable, so I had like a more relaxed relationship with the players, and they kind of took in a lot of what I said. It's really rewarding.
When you see, and maybe you've already had this happen a couple of times, when you have that light bulb moment with a kid, when some sort of skill that you're teaching them finally clicks, you don't have to, who cares about being paid at that point? It's such a wonderful, rewarding thing. It's amazing.
When my dogs show up my baseball equipment, I'm glad I invest in Bitcoin so I can buy some new gloves because they've already gone through 2 already, and hopefully they don't go through number 3. I feel safe with my investment. The transactions are anonymous and more secure than conventional currency. You'll love Jeremy from the Bitcoin Cash podcast. He has a wealth of knowledge on the subject, and he's even designed his own app for Bitcoin. If you want to learn more about him and just some more about Bitcoin in general, check out him and his podcast. It's all in the show description for this episode. Baseball has changed, and so has the way that we view currency. And if you want to spend some Bitcoin after a big victory or a huge upset, head down to Ravish Kitchen and Cocktails. Because, happy hour is always an option, good or bad or indifferent. Check out their website for their fun seasonal events, and they have great American cuisine highlighting local ingredients from their chefs. And one of their owners is a former baseball player and my current brother, Ryan Giffen. Thank you to the Bitcoin Cash podcast and Ravish Kitchen and Cocktails for sponsoring this episode. Now, back to the rest of the episode.
No, I didn't make shit coaching, but it was fun and worth every moment of it. Like I still keep in touch with, like, some of them actually follow the podcast I'm doing. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But I remember one time when I was coaching, and I wasn't at the game because like I was still in high school at the time playing ball, and I just teach this one kid how to like go through a ball from the outfield, outside your foot, come up shooting, and then he threw a kid out at home, and he said that's because that's what McKay taught me, and I was just like, it's those things that are so invaluable. Did you have any moments like that?
Oh, I've had so many moments like that. Usually, it's when pitchers come to me for lessons. And they say, normally it's, a year goes by, they haven't picked up a baseball, they've grown 6 inches, and all their arms and legs are so much longer than when they last started throwing. They can't figure, why can't I throw strikes? And so all of a sudden, I'll just notice a couple of things here, there, their front shoulder, where they're stepping, how they're coming up, their legs and arms aren't working together. It's usually 1 or 2 things, and it clicks. And just the happiness when all of a sudden there's 4 strikes in a row, just like it was last year. And
Yeah.
that really gets it going for me. The little things like that. It's one of the things I tell the parents and we've talked about this on my podcast too. Remember how passionate your coaches are. Remember that the coaches are there for the good of your kids, because that experience and that passion needs to be appreciated when you want to go talk to them. So that's a really important thing to remember as a parent.
Yeah. One thing that was fun too when I was coaching, like I'd help out the kids on a couple Saturdays, and I'd be throwing BP to them, and I still play men's league, so they throw a couple rounds to me. I kind of liked doing that with them. Like, it's almost like being competitive with them in a way that you want them to outdo you, so it's still fun.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's nothing better. There's nothing better, and you will probably have this experience at some point when someone you have coached exceeds where you played.
Yeah,
that's a much better feeling. I've had a few kids that have gone into the upper levels, and even a couple that have got some innings in the bigs, and just feels so good. It's like that. That's really wonderful stuff. So,
who are some guys that you coached that made it to the big leagues?
Well, I had the Kaminska brothers, Patrick and Kyle. Those are the ones that I worked with most frequently. Now, neither of them made it to the big leagues, but they both got into the middle levels.
That's still really impressive.
I count John Switzer because I played with him at ASU, but I really worked with him quite a lot. And he was first rounder. I think it was sandwich pick for the Mets. This is way back. But he definitely counts. But just a few guys I've worked with along the way. And it's funny because so Javier Lopez of the Giants, reliever, I taught him to throw submarine. Because he was on the D-backs and he was a starter and he was over the top. And I don't know if he seemed like he was doing a good job. At 2000 in High Desert, they said, start throwing with Charlie. And so we started throwing underneath, and that's where that developed. And of course, my career was over after that season. His shot off like a rocket. And I don't know how many years he got in the big leagues, but that was something. So it's really nice to see guys that you've worked with and coached with and taught get up there.
Yeah. And a couple of guys like I played with, like I told you, one's in pro ball right now. He got sent back down again to AAA. He got called up for I think a doubleheader. He threw an inning with the Diamondbacks. And I got another guy I played with. He's in High A with the Twins right now. He played for the University of Tennessee the year they won they set the single season record for collegiate baseball wins, and he had a really good year. He went above his projected draft slot. So it's fun following those guys, just rooting for them. Who were some of the most talented players you came across when you were in the minor leagues?
In the minor leagues, best guy I played with was Lyle Overbay.
Oh my God, I remember him. Yeah,
right?
Didn't he set the single season doubles record for the Brewers?
Yes. No, he set all kinds of records in the minors too, as you can imagine. But no, he was the 1999 Missoula Osprey, champions of the Pioneer League, and he was the MVP, and it wasn't even close. But the guy, Lyle, was not a high round draft pick. I think he might have been somewhere in the 20s coming out of University of Nevada.
Wow.
But he would get to the ballpark for a 7:00 game before anybody else. And he would take a bucket of balls and a tee out to the field. And he was a lefty. And so he would just work on hitting to the left center gap, just staying inside the ball, staying through, and just time after time. And then he'd go pick up his own balls. This is a professional player. I mean, this is him doing that. We'd be getting to the field, driving up to the field 4 or 5 o'clock. There's Lyle out getting his work in every single time. First guy in, last guy out. And so his success was not by accident. He rose to the top because he's pretty much the hardest worker I've ever seen.
Yeah, and he had I think it was close to 60 doubles in one season or something.
Oh yeah. It was an incredible stroke, and there was nobody. He had no holes in the swing. Just incredible the amount he worked on it. Was he phenomenally talented? Honestly, no. He was a tremendous fielder at first base, but he just practiced that swing like nobody I've ever seen.
Yeah, I was actually listening to this one baseball YouTuber, Matt Antonelli. He was drafted by the Padres, and he said the most talented player he ever played with, and he played with Adrian Gonzalez, faced Tim Lincecum, Ubaldo Mendes. The most talented guy he played with was David Eckstein, just because of his work ethic. The way he wasn't a big guy, he didn't have a strong arm, just the routes he would take to a ground ball, how intensely he practiced. And it's just something with those guys they go to another gear mentally to stay in the big leagues or like get to the next level.
Yeah. I played with a guy exactly like that in Willie Bloomquist at ASU.
I remember him.
The fun, and again, he was hardest worker, just incredible. Such a leader, such a captain. He knew the guys where they needed to be, have a fire lit under him, and he was always there. What a great leader. The best example of that was, you can recall, I was trying to walk onto that team in the fall of '98, and so I would do whatever I could, try to win whatever contest there was, and so we would do these long distance runs. There was no reason for him, the best player on the team, going to be the top draft pick from that team, to try to beat anybody on that run. But he would always beat me. He would never, ever let me win just because he was that kind of animal competitor. I would always come in second every single time. He could have dogged it, but that wasn't the point. That's just how he lived his life. And it came through on the field and in his work ethic. He was incredible.
Yeah. So what's one of your favorite memories from your playing days? Something that you still can look back at?
It's a very, very specific, very visceral moment. I've talked about this one on my podcast too. Coach Pat Murphy was my coach at ASU. And in 1 year, I learned so much from him. I mean, he was just the ideal player's coach. There was one moment where we were playing New Mexico, and it was a home game. I had just come off of probably the worst outing of my career. We had played at Florida State. It was my first time in that sort of environment in Tallahassee, 3,000, screaming fans. And they were just, it was so incredibly loud, and I was terrible. And at that point, I genuinely wondered if I should be here. I questioned whether or not I should be on the roster. And I went out to the New Mexico game. That was the home series after that. They put me in the middle innings when I always was coming up. There was a guy on first base, a bunch of right-handers coming up. Basically, my job was to come in and strike the righties out, because with the submarine slider, that's usually pretty easy to do. I hadn't walked anybody all season, and we were like 18 games into the season. That was just my thing. Florida State, they hit me around a lot, but I didn't walk anybody. This first guy comes up, 4 straight balls. And I'm like, okay, well, that's something I haven't been doing before, but I was just nervous. I was in my own head. So now guy in first and second. No outs, by the way. Then the next guy comes up, another righty, should be able to strike this guy out. Ball 1, ball 2, ball 3, ball 4. 8 straight balls. I've walked the bases loaded. The home fans at Packard Stadium at ASU are now yelling, take this kid out, rag arm. And I'm like, what are you talking about? 18 games. I've been phenomenal. What are we doing? And now everybody's on me. Next guy comes up, right-hander. Ball 1, ball 2, ball 3. And I'm about to walk this guy, and I'm about to walk the bases low, or walk in a run with nobody out. The crowd is just deafening in my ear. Pat Murphy, I look over, he's coming out of the dugout. I'm like, he's going to pull me. He's going to pull me at 3-0. He's not even going to let me finish this hitter. I can't believe it. This is so embarrassing. Murph steps out of that dugout. He stops. He cups his hands to his mouth and he yells, Charlie, I believe in you. And everybody was dead silent. Everybody in that crowd just shut up. And I got back up. I felt 1,000,000 feet tall. And I just said, wow, I've got it now. My coach believes in me. Let's go. Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. That guy's done. Next guy, first pitch, ground ball to Willie Bloomquist, double play, inning over, out of it.
Wow.
That was such an incredibly crystallizing moment to me as to the power a coach can have.
Yeah.
When he's realized what a player needs in an instant and can find it and get through to somebody. That's still, I don't see how anybody can top that well, I certainly can't in terms of baseball, but every day when I go out there to coach, I try to look for opportunities like that. Because what Murph did for me that day rescued me, saved me, built confidence into me. That's the power a coach can have.
And that's really difficult to do, because especially with a whole team, you have to know how to do that to everyone on an individual level.
It is. And what's funny is that part of the podcast episode where I talk about that, I talk about coaching individuals. He had given us a personality test, a Myers-Briggs personality test in the fall.
That's a really good idea.
He knew. Oh, he had tons of good ideas. He was such a brilliant coach. he knew what we were all made of. He knew what made us tick, and he knew in times of stress, I needed external motivation. He never told me that, but I just know that he knew that based on me, and it worked. And got to know your players as individuals. It makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, because everyone talent, like there's one Tom Seaver quote I heard, like everyone talent wise, physically, especially at the major league level, they're all about the same. It's about who can withstand the mental grind of it.
It definitely is. And I did a lot of work with Don Cooper, the pitching coach for the White Sox for a very long time. And he would never talk about techniques or, muscles or movements or shoulder. He says, it's all mental at this stage. He goes, That's it. That's all I'm doing. I'm just a psychologist. And that's all these kids need. They already know what to do. They just have to remember how to train their brains to do it.
Yeah, that's why I started reading the Harvey Dorfman book. I think I got it right up. Oh, yeah. The Mental Game of Baseball. That's one I picked up because, especially now that I'm done playing, I'm just more fascinated with the psychological aspect of it.
Sure.
Because I think it's more psych involved than physical pretty much most of the time.
And the ultimate quote, Yogi said, hey, 90% of this game is mental. The other half is physical.
Yeah. Yeah. So how's it having a podcast? How are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it quite a lot. It's interesting because I've done a lot of speaking engagements, like I said, through Positive Coaching Alliance, but I really enjoy just sitting down, just me and a microphone a lot of times, going through my notes, going through a lot of things. People email the show. They can email talkingwithcoaches@gmail.com. So I read those emails and I get to answer those questions. That's usually the last half of the show. And
that's
so
cool.
It's really a fun interactive format. And I can talk about basic things that whatever subjects I have on my mind. But then if people need answers, I can answer those too. It's been great so far.
Are you bringing any interesting guests on?
Well, so far it's been tough to book people. The last guest that I brought on was a guy named Noah Peary. He played at ASU. He was the big sidearm submariner before I got there. Okay. And you'll appreciate this. In 2 years, as a reliever, he was 17-4.
Wow.
I still don't understand how. And he also had, during that time, 17 saves. I'm like, no, you can't. You can't win your own game that you save.
What?
So 34. I know. I had to look it up twice. He said, no, that's accurate.
Basically, was he pitching like every other day?
He was pitching 2 games out of 3, and they were using him like they used to use Goose Gossage. He threw over 100 innings in 1994 as a reliever.
That's insane.
It was just crazy. But the way he whipped his arm sidearm like that, guys just had a tough time. Nobody could square him up, and he was very successful.
Yeah. So what's a funny story you got from your playing days? Sure, in the clubhouse, see some interesting things. Oh, you do see some interesting things. There's no question about it. It's very amusing because I also know Spanish, but it's very amusing to see. Oh God, you must have heard some really
to be in a locker room and with Dominican players and Puerto Rican players, and of course some American-born kids that are fresh out of high school. Yeah. And every single time that they're having a conversation in Spanish, always the American-born kids out of high school are thinking they're having a conversation about them, and so I had to break up so many fights. It was really absurd. I said, no, that's not what they said. Just you back to your corner. And when we played in Missoula, Montana in 1999, we didn't have a stadium yet because it was the first year they had a team there. We were playing on a Legion field, and so they had just bleachers. We had 2,000 people every single game. The town was so baseball hungry they couldn't get enough. So 2,000 people packed into old bleachers and lawn chairs wherever they could find seats. And the challenging part of that was there's a stadium. If you want to use the bathroom, you're going to use the public bathroom. You, a professional athlete, are going to use the J-John that's out on the right field bleachers. So my usual routine at ASU was I know that I was going to be on, in the 6th, 7th, or 8th inning. I was a middle innings guy. I was a setup guy. Mm-hmm. So I would usually, get sort of that bubble guts feeling. And I always tell kids, hey, I got it too. Everybody gets a little nervous before they go out there, but maybe it's just excitement. Maybe that's all it is. But I knew it was it. So I would go use the bathroom. And so that would be my routine. About the 4th, 5th inning, I would go and I would wade through the crowd over in the right field bullpen, go over to the Porta-John, normally people would let me through because I was a uniformed player, and they understood, oh, he has better things to do than wait in line. And then I would come back, and then I'd be able to pitch. So one time, there was a guy named Dax. He was at every single game in right field, and he was kind of the ringleader of all the very loud people down there. And Dax noticed that I would have to use the J-John in the fourth or fifth inning. So when I came out of the bathroom, he had organized more than 100 fans to stand outside the door and just scream as loud as they could. And I opened the door, and Dax yelled, "He's ready to go!" And they all erupted in cheers. And I was like, oh, okay. And after the game, and I actually pitched that game and did very well. But after the game, my pitching coach said, "What was going on down right field line?" And so I told him this story, and he goes, "Oh, that's just ridiculous." But that was probably the funniest moment related to pro baseball that I've ever had. It was such a unique thing. But that was really kind of the warm feeling that we got from those Missoula fans. Yeah. That same warm feeling did not spill over into High Desert of the following year. That was a hard place to play. Very few people came to be fair, the 2000 High Desert Mavericks weren't any good. I think we had a winning percentage in the 200s. We were lousy. But I don't know if we drew 100 people to a game. It was a real challenging spot. It's hard enough to pitch in the California League when people aren't coming out to see you. So I had an incredible first year on the heels of a great year at ASU. And then in 2000, trying to get my shoulder back in shape and just not doing well, lousy year. So a big difference in between them. But yeah, I had a very strange year and a half in pro ball, but it's fun to look back on.
Yeah. Well, before we get wrapping up, just tell everyone where to find you one last time.
Sure. No, my podcast is called Talking with Coaches, and you can email the show talkingwithcoaches@gmail.com. But to make sure you have the right one, if you see, me from 20 years ago with my pitching stance, that's my 2000 High Desert Mavericks card. So if you see somebody that's sort of, staring you down as a pitcher with a funny looking glove, then you're in the right spot. So Talking with Coaches, you can get it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts.
That's right. Hey, Charlie, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, McKay. I wish more people had the passion for baseball that you have. It's really dying off. So just keep spreading the word, and hopefully we can keep baseball going.
Yeah, man, that's what it's all about. It's fun seeing the younger generations get into it too.
Yeah.